Okay, here's a little tutorial on making 9-patch squares. The quilt I'm making utilizes 9-patch squares, and they are made in light value colors and dark value colors. The additional half square triangles make up the rest of the pattern. So when you look at this particular square here, you notice that I have 8 half square triangles, and so far 1 dark value, 9-patch in the middle. 3 more will follow. Then at each corner of that particular block there will be a 9-patch in light colored values. Making 9 patches using 2.5-inch squares seems like a daunting process, but it's very, very easy to do, and the results can be very spectacular, and you use up a lot of pieces of fabric that you have in your scrap bins. So I'll show you the process that I use for making 9 patches, and I hope you have some success sewing 9-patch squares. On my desk I have a whole bunch of 2.5-inch squares. I've been cutting 2.5-inch squares for a while. I've got a whole bin full of them. So it's time to make some 9-patch squares that I can use in a quilt. My process for making fast 9-patch is to chain piece them. So on my sewing machine, I just place 2 2.5-inch squares right sides together and chain a whole long row of them together. For this quilt I'm making, I'm going to use dark 9 patches and place them on the wall with light 9 patches, and so they will contrast nicely on the quilt. So the first part of chaining the squares together is to make a long section of two pieces. I sew them together, and then I just keep on going all the way down the chain. The next part is going to be to add the third section, the third square, onto the end. And all I do is just lay them down on the tabletop, open one out, take another one, put it right side to right side, sew one, take the next one, put them right side to right side, sew it, the next one, put right side to right side, move my hand that time, okay, and then sew it. And when I get to the end of the row, I take them off, and then I cut them. I'll show you. I measure out 3, and then I cut them so that I have 3 sections sewn together, all joined together. So all I have to do is then fold this part down, sew it along there, then sew the next part to this side, then press it out. And I'll show you how I press it out and iron it and trim it, because I need to trim these just a little bit. So first of all, I'll show you how I sew them together. the right sides together, match the end, and match the end on this side. Give it a little tug, and that way the seam allowances pop up, and they're always matched together because they're joined together from the first row of chain stitching. Always make sure that one seam allowance goes in one direction, the other one goes in the other direction, so that they will press evenly and stay nice and flat. Finish one, fold that up, fold this one down, do the same thing with the next one. And you know which way the seam allowance has to go, so that you turn that one on. Okay, all the seam allowances match, the corners match nicely. It's easy to do. Now, because I'm using 6.5 inch blocks to do my half square triangles, I have to trim these down just slightly so that they become 6 inches rather than 6.5, which they are now. So once I get them pressed, and they're really easy to press because the seam allowances are all nicely going in the correct direction. So to press these, it's easy to do. First of all, I keep it folded, press up one side. This one I press up that way because that's the way the seam allowances go. And this one I just press through the middle like that. Then give it a press on the right side, so they stay nice and flat. Seam allowances are all pressed nicely. Both sides. Okay, so now I've got my square all pressed. I need to trim it just a little bit because sometimes the edges are a little wonky and I don't like them that way. So in order to trim this to 6 inches, I use this measurement here on my 6.25 inch ruler. And that's 2 inches. I lay that directly over top of the center block, matching the lines for the 2 and the 4 inches. I'm only trimming a little bit off around the outside in 2 directions. Then I turn the block around, match it up again, and trim again. I would have used a different size block if I had them, but I had 2.5 inch blocks. So I'm using what I've got, and that's the block trimmed, and it can go in place on the wall to become part of the quilt next. All right, next step. It will use a lot of my 2.5 inch squares, and it makes a very big block in a short period of time. So once again, there's 2.5 inch blocks. I make a 9 patch, either a light or a dark 9 patch, and then half square triangles using 6.5 inch squares, and I trim them all to 6 inches, and then I'll sew them together, and it will make a pretty big quilt in a very short amount of time. So I hope you find it useful, especially sewing 9 patches together. That's a a very fast and easy way to sew a 9 patch. If you have any questions, just reply to the video and I will answer your questions. Thank you. Bye.